This is what we trained for, Danny reminded his crews. We've got the capacity and the capability to handle multiple threats. Stay focused, stay safe, and remember your mountain flying procedures. The operation continued into the evening, but the high-altitude environment created new challenges for their night operations. The thin air affected their engines' performance, while the complex terrain pushed their navigation systems to their limits. All aircraft, be advised, Danny broadcast. We're seeing increased mechanical turbulence after sunset. Mountain winds are shifting unpredictably. Maintain maximum spacing between aircraft. The night brought a new threat. Cold air drainage was creating powerful downdrafts in the canyons, while thermal activities from the fire generated equally strong updrafts. The resulting turbulence tested both aircraft and crews. Tanker 1915, hold position, Danny commanded as he watched a particularly violent mountain wave develop. Wait for that rotor to dissipate before attempting your drop. The operation continued through the night, the DC-10S working with methodical precision despite the challenging conditions. Their night vision systems and terrain-following radar proved crucial in the complex mountain environment. By dawn, their efforts had begun to show results. The main fire's advance had been checked, while quick responses had prevented most of the new lightning-caused starts from growing significant. This mission pushed us to our limits, Danny told his crews during the debrief. But it also proved something important: these aircraft can operate effectively even in the most challenging mountain environments. The success of the High Country mission added new dimensions to their capabilities. They had demonstrated that the DC-10 fleet could adapt to extreme conditions, maintaining effectiveness despite thin air, complex terrain, and severe turbulence. As they prepared for their next assignment, Danny reviewed the data from their mountain operations. Every mission in these conditions provided new insights into high-altitude aerial firefighting techniques. We're writing the book on large air tanker operations in mountain environments, he told Jack during the post-mission analysis. Nobody's ever operated aircraft this size, with this capability, in terrain like this before. The morning sun illuminated the snow-capped peaks around their mountain base as ground crews prepared the DC-10S for their next mission. Each aircraft had proven itself capable of operating safely and effectively in conditions that would ground most aerial firefighting platforms. Danny's radio crackled with another alert. A new fire was developing in the Great Basin, threatening both sage-grouse habitat and ranching communities. But he knew his teams were ready. The lessons learned in the high country would serve them well in their next challenge. The Great Basin alert came through just as crews were completing their mountain operations debrief. A massive rangeland fire had exploded across northern Nevada, driven by strong winds and record-breaking temperatures. This is a different kind of challenge, Jack explained during the emergency briefing. We're looking at a fire front nearly 20 miles wide, moving at unprecedented speed through sage steppe habitat. Critical sage-grouse breeding grounds are threatened, along with multiple ranching operations. Danny studied the satellite imagery. Unlike their previous missions in forested areas, this fire was racing across open country, creating its own wind patterns as it consumed the drought-stressed vegetation. The scale of this one is staggering, he noted. How many aircraft can we get on station? We can deploy all 5 DC-10S, Jack replied. The extended visibility in the basin means we can operate them safely with greater spacing. Fuel consumption will be lower at these elevations compared to the mountain operations. Danny nodded, already formulating a strategy. The Great Basin's unique characteristics would require different tactics than their forest fire operations. This is going to be about strategic line placement, he told his crews during the briefing. We're not trying to stop this fire cold, we couldn't even with our entire fleet. We need to guide it, create anchor points for ground forces, and protect critical habitat areas. The tactical plan reflected the vast scale of their challenge. They would use their DC-10S in a coordinated pattern to establish massive containment lines, taking advantage of the open terrain to create wider, longer drops than would be possible in more confined areas. All crews, be advised, Danny broadcast as they approached the fire zone. Dust devils and fire whirls are common in these conditions. Watch for sudden wind shifts, they can reverse direction without warning in this terrain. As they arrived on scene, the scope of the fire became clear. The smoke column extended for miles, while dust and ash were being lifted thousands of feet into the air by multiple fire-generated vortices. Tanker 1910, this is lead plane, Eddie reported. Fire spread rate is exceeding anything in our experience. We're seeing rates of advance over 15 miles per hour in some sectors. Danny quickly assessed their options. We'll need to get out ahead of this one. Tankers 1912 and 1913, begin establishing an anchor line 5 miles ahead of the main front. 1914 and 1915, focus on protecting those sage grouse leks marked on our maps. The operation required precise coordination despite the vast distances involved. The DC-10s worked in pairs, laying down parallel lines of retardant that stretched for miles across the landscape. Ground teams reporting success with your lines, the incident commander radioed. The retardant is giving them something to work with, but we've got a new problem. Fire's creating its own weather system, generating massive inflow winds. Danny watched as the fire's behavior became increasingly extreme. The combination of heat, wind, and unstable atmosphere was creating conditions he'd never seen before. All aircraft, adjust your patterns, he commanded. We need to factor in these inflow winds. They're affecting our retardant dispersal patterns. The operation became more complex as they discovered multiple values at risk across the vast landscape. Ancient petroglyphs, isolated ranches, and critical wildlife habitat all needed protection. The DC-10s demonstrated their versatility, shifting between large-scale containment lines and precise point protection drops. New spot fires developing 3 miles ahead of the main front, the lead plane reported. The winds carrying burning tumbleweeds unprecedented distances. Danny redirected their efforts. Tankers 1914 and 1915, split up and tackle those spots. We can't let them establish new heads in this fuel type. The challenge was complicated by the Great Basin's unique weather patterns. As the sun heated the vast expanses of sage and grass, massive thermal columns developed, creating turbulence that affected their drops even at higher altitudes. Watch those dispersal patterns, Danny advised his crews. The hot air rising off the desert floor is affecting our retardant coverage. We may need to adjust our release altitudes. As afternoon approached, they faced another characteristic Great Basin challenge. Thunderstorms were building over the nearby mountains, while remaining dry at lower elevations. The resulting outflow winds created hazardous operating conditions. All aircraft, be advised, Danny broadcast. We're getting microburst activity from those cells to the west. Maintain maximum altitude separation and watch for wind shear. The operation continued into evening, but the Great Basin's diurnal wind patterns created new challenges. As the desert floor cooled, strong surface winds developed, pushing the fire in new directions. This is where our night capabilities really prove their worth, Danny told the incident commander. We can keep working through these wind shifts, using our infrared systems to track fire movement and maintain effective drop patterns. The night brought its own set of challenges. The vast, open landscape that had aided visibility during the day now presented navigation challenges, with few reference points visible in the darkness. Switching to terrain following radar, Danny announced as he brought Tanker 1910 in for another run. Our synthetic vision systems will give us a clear picture of the ground features even in these conditions. The operation continued through the night, the DC-10s working methodically to contain the massive fire's spread. Their large capacity and ability to operate effectively in darkness proved crucial in the vast expanses of the Great Basin. By dawn, their efforts had begun to show results. The main fire's advance had been slowed, while strategic placement of retardant lines had protected the most critical habitat areas. "This mission taught us something important," Danny told his crews during the debrief. "In this environment, it's not just about dropping retardant, it's about understanding fire behavior on a landscape scale and using our capabilities strategically." The success of the Great Basin mission added new techniques to their repertoire. They had demonstrated that the DC-10 fleet could operate effectively even in the most challenging rangeland conditions, adapting their tactics to the unique characteristics of this vast landscape. "We're developing new approaches to rangeland fire management," he told Jack during the post-mission analysis. "The DC-10's capacity and range make it uniquely suited for these large-scale operations." The morning sun illuminated the vast expanse of the Great Basin as ground crews prepared the aircraft for their next mission. Each DC-10 had proven itself capable of adapting to the unique challenges of this environment, maintaining effectiveness despite extreme conditions. Danny's radio crackled with another alert. A new fire was developing in the Pacific Northwest, threatening both timber resources and salmon habitat. But he knew his teams were ready. The lessons learned in the Great Basin would inform their approach to this new challenge. 3 days later, the call came from the Pacific Northwest. The Columbia Complex fire had exploded across the Washington-Oregon border, threatening several small communities and thousands of acres of old-growth forest. 2 of the DC-10s were immediately dispatched north. "Weather patterns are totally different up here," Flight engineer Lisa Parker noted during the pre-flight briefing at Moses Lake Air Base. "We're dealing with lower visibility from coastal moisture and more challenging terrain." Tanker 1910 and Tanker 1912 would be working in tandem, a rare opportunity to coordinate 2 VLATs simultaneously. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Columbia River Gorge as both massive aircraft took off, following their respective lead planes toward the fire complex. "Tanker 1910, this is Northwest Command. We've got spot fires jumping our lines faster than ground crews can respond. Primary target is protecting the Watershed Ridge community." "Copy that, Command. Tanker 1912 and I can alternate drops to maintain constant coverage," Danny responded. "What's the wind doing?" "Winds are erratic. We've got a weather system moving in that's creating unpredictable patterns. Stay alert for sudden changes." The 2 DC-10s established a circular pattern, one dropping while the other reloaded at Moses Lake. The coordination was precise, like a mechanical ballet with aircraft weighing hundreds of thousands of pounds. Below, Incident Commander Jack Foy watched the massive aircraft through binoculars. 25 years of firefighting experience, and he'd never seen anything quite like this. The retardant drops were creating a massive containment line that would have taken days to establish by conventional means. But nature had other plans. A cold front moving in from the Pacific collapsed the atmospheric conditions, creating violent downdrafts across the ridges. Danny felt Tanker 1910 shudder as it hit unexpected turbulence. "All aircraft, this is lead. We've got severe wind shear developing. Recommend immediate suspension of drops until conditions improve." Tanker 1912, in the middle of its approach, suddenly caught a powerful downdraft. The massive aircraft dropped several hundred feet in seconds, its engines screaming as the pilots fought for control. 1912, pull up. Pull up. Rodriguez shouted over the radio. The DC-10 superior power helped it recover, but it was a stark reminder of nature's unpredictability. Both VLATs were forced to hold at higher altitude while the weather system passed, watching helplessly as the fire below continued to spread. Northwest Command to all units. We're losing the ridge. Ground crews fall back to secondary positions. Hours passed as the teams waited for conditions to improve. The fire grew more intense, creating its own weather system with towering pyrocumulus clouds. Finally, a break in the weather appeared. Lead to tankers. I think we've got a window here. The inversion layer is stabilizing. Who's got fuel for the first run? Tanker 1910, ready to go. We've got enough for 2 drops before we need to reload. 1912 right behind you. Let's make this count. The coordination between the 2 massive aircraft was extraordinary. As one pulled up from its drop, the other was already lining up, creating an almost continuous stream of retardant across the fire's path. Ground crews seized the opportunity, quickly establishing containment lines behind the aerial assault. By sunset, the tide had turned. The Columbia complex fire wasn't out, but its eastern spread had been halted. Both DC-10s had flown multiple missions, dropping over 100,000 gallons of retardant combined. The teams were exhausted but satisfied as they debriefed at Moses Lake. "Never thought I'd see the day we'd have 2 DC-10s working the same fire," Foy remarked. "Changed the whole game up here." But even as they discussed the day's success, another call was coming in. This time from Northern California, the Flasco Fire was making a run toward populated areas. The crews looked at each other, knowing their work was far from over. "How much crew rest do we need before heading south?" Danny asked the room. Parker checked her logs. "Minimum 12 hours. But the new crew can take 1912 down now if needed." "Make it happen," Foy ordered. "I'll call Sacramento and let them know help is on the way." As night fell over Moses Lake, maintenance crews were already preparing Tanker 1912 for its next mission. The sound of tools and voices echoed across the tarmac as they worked under portable lights, racing against time. In the pilot's lounge, a fresh crew was reviewing weather patterns and fire behavior predictions for California. This was the reality of the 2025 fire season: constant movement, multiple major incidents, and an ever-growing reliance on these converted aerial giants. The DC-10s had proven themselves invaluable, but they were only tools. The real story was the men and women who operated them, coordinated their deployment, and worked on the ground beneath them, all fighting to protect lives and land from nature's most destructive force. And somewhere in the darkness, another fire was starting, another call for help would come, and these massive firefighting machines would lumber into the sky once again, their crews ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. The Flasco Fire proved to be a monster unlike anything the crews had faced before. As Tanker 1912 approached the Bale Air Force Base in the pre-dawn hours, the pyrocumulus clouds were visible from 60 miles out, illuminated by the fire below like some hellish thunderstorm. "My God," whispered First Officer Rachel Martinez, staring at the sight. "That thing's creating its own weather system." Air Attack Supervisor David Cho was already airborne in his OV-10, coordinating the early morning operations. "Tanker 1912, welcome to California. Hope you got some rest, because this one's going to be a long haul." The fire had already consumed over 200,000 acres, making it the second largest in modern California history. The drought-stricken landscape offered little resistance to its advance, and unusual weather patterns were pushing it in unpredictable directions. At the temporary command post established at a high school in Paradise, California, Incident Commander Danny Cordero, recently promoted from his captain position, was coordinating with multiple agencies. The promotion had come faster than expected, but the increasing frequency and severity of fires had accelerated everyone's career trajectories. "What assets do we have in the air right now?" he asked his operations chief. 2S working the western flank, 1912 just arrived from Washington, and 1910 will be here within the hour. We've also got 4 Type 1 helicopters doing structure protection in the valley. Cordero studied the infrared imagery showing the fire's progress. "This eastern finger concerns me. If it crosses this ridge, we've got 3 communities in its path with limited evacuation routes." The radio crackled. "Command, this is Cho. That eastern section is starting to spot. We're seeing embers carrying up to a mile ahead of the main front." "Copy that. Get 1912 on those spots. Priority is protecting the evacuation routes." In the DC-10, Martinez and his crew were already preparing for their first drop. The aircraft's tanks had been filled with a new fire retardant formula, supposedly more effective at preventing spot fires. They'd be among the first to test it in real conditions. Tanker 19er12, this is lead. I've got your drop path mapped out. We'll need to split it into 2 runs, the terrain's too complex for a single pass. Copy, lead. We're ready when you are. The massive aircraft descended toward the smoke-shrouded landscape. Even through the specialized filters in their oxygen masks, the crew could smell the burning forest. The first run would need to thread between 2 ridgelines, laying retardant precisely along a Forest Service road that served as one of the main evacuation routes. Starting run, Martinez announced. Switches armed. The DC-10 seemed to hang in the air, surprisingly graceful despite its size. The release of 6,000 gallons of retardant in the first pass created a distinct crimson line through the brown and gray landscape below. Good coverage, Cho confirmed. Let's set up for the second run immediately. Winds are starting to shift.